Welcome back everyone, it's Mindy here today for lawnfawn, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing a technique that I was playing with where we are going to make some stunning ink blended glittery backgrounds using the lawnfawn inks and also the pixie dust glitter cardstock, and I have some do's and don'ts along the way that I would like to share with you. So I'm going to start out by creating the backgrounds. So this is a piece of the pixie dust glitter cardstock and all of its gorgeous sparkle. And then I picked out a rainbow of colors of the lawnfawn inks. So I have here raspberry, pumpkin spice, sunflower, freshly cut grass, peacock, and juice box. And the reason I picked these colors, these are very bright colors. And the reason I picked them was when I was playing beforehand, I had chosen some really light colors, and when I had applied them to the background, they were almost too light for me. They are definitely a gorgeous combination, and I'll show that piece of cardstock later on in the video, but I wanted something more vibrant. So I'm starting off with the raspberry ink, and I'm applying that just to a little section of the pixie dust cardstock. I am using a life-changing blender brush. You can use whatever blending tool that you have, but I actually recommend something with a bristle. If you use a sponge dauber, it catches a lot on that glittery background because it's textured, and it kind of catches the pieces of the sponge and leaves it on your background. So if you have any other type of bristle blending tool, I would recommend that. But definitely, use what you have in your stash if you want to give this a try. And with this glitter cardstock, what I'm finding is you can apply the ink, but when you go to apply a second color, for instance, this pumpkin spice, they're not going to blend. They actually kind of push each other back and forth. I couldn't get quite a seamless line between the two. And you'll notice it more when I start applying the sunflower cardstock or the sunflower ink. So I'm just doing some circular motions with these bristles. It went on really, really smooth. And you can see that that yellow is not blending to the orange. It's kind of, they're playing tug of war with each other is what it feels like to me. But I just kind of go over it lightly. I just want to make sure I have that definite line of color or that strip of color on my background. Now what I kind of cut out of the video to save a little bit of time is I have about 4 main blending brushes that I use, and in between when I want to switch colors, I'm just cleaning them off on a rag that I had spritzed with water or a bottle that I filled with some rubbing alcohol, and I'm cleaning them in between so that I don't have to grab any other brushes or another blending tool. So I kind of go back and forth, and I just wanted to save some time in the video. And as far as the colors I've chosen, there are so many different gorgeous combinations you can do. I had played with some purples, different shades of purples, which turned out gorgeous. Rainbow was just the easiest one, and I could pair it with so many different things from lawnfawn. So that's kind of why I went with the rainbow, and these colors are so gorgeous on this pixie dust cardstock. I'm going to give you a close-up here of just all of this sparkle. The pictures that I have at the end and the beginning of the video really don't capture how gorgeous this is in person. But there is a catch to it, which I will explain later on in the video. So this is another background that I'm working on. And I'm actually starting with some sunflower ink towards this is actually going to be the bottom of my card. And then I'm going to come in with some raspberry. And I do throw in some pumpkin spice, I think, along the way. I was getting my brushes mixed up here and there, which worked out. It wasn't that big of a deal. But you can see these two colors are kind of fighting with each other. I'm not quite getting a blend. I think the ink is sitting more on top of the sparkle. There's nothing to soak that ink in, which is one of the things that I ran into a problem with. So after my red, I'm going to come in with some juice box and add that in. And I do also come in with Deep Sea, which is a really beautiful blue. Problem number 2 was I wasn't keeping track of my brushes, so I actually grabbed my Deep Sea instead of my purple along the way. But the nice thing is, like I said, these really push back against each other, so I was able to still kind of mix them up and blend them together a little bit as best as I could. And it's always nice to have kind of a scratch paper off on the side to test your brushes or whatever blending tool you happen to be using. Well, that's where I went wrong. I actually inked up my sponge with the deep sea ink. But I'm going to come in, I'm going to just push that ink. It's still going to turn into a gorgeous background. Now, one thing I want to mention is that if you plan on die cutting any images or even a frame from these inked backgrounds, definitely let them sit for a while. I think that was one of my issues when I was making this video, is that my ink was still pretty wet. It was still sitting on top of that glitter cardstock. So definitely leave them maybe overnight or wipe them with kind of a nice smooth cloth of sorts to pick up any excess ink. A couple of the backgrounds I had done, I didn't get any ink from them. They had been sitting for a couple days. Other ones, the ink was coming right off. So I think letting these inks sit and dry for a while would really help if you plan on die cutting anything from them. So here are the two backgrounds that I had just created. This is one from a previous one I did a few days ago, and you can see the difference. These are some really light colors that I had used in there. I think the top one was maybe flamingo, which is actually a bright pink. But once I put it on that pixie dust cardstock, it wasn't as bright. It kind of toned it down. Now for my first card, which is this really vibrant background that I have, I actually die cut from white cardstock the fancy lattice. And that's going to go over top of my background. I also went ahead and die cut some butterflies from the layered butterfly set. So I did the outline in fog cardstock, and then I did the base layer in white cardstock, and that was just so I was able to see the difference between the two layers, and they're just going to show up on that background a little bit. I really wanted the colors to kind of shine through more than anything. So next I'm taking the lawnfawn glue and I'm going around the entire edge and then just adding spots of glue here and there throughout that whole background. Then I'll go ahead and just attach this right onto my ink blended glitter cardstock. Hold that down really well, and then I'm actually going to put something heavy on it for a little bit to make sure that that glue really sticks. And I'll also go ahead and attach my layered butterfly together while I'm waiting for my background to kind of adhere really well together. Next, for my sentiment, I'm just going to die cut one of the simple wavy banners from white cardstock. And I'm going to use the Wavy Sayings stamp set, which is going to fit perfectly on my wavy banner. So to do this, I'm just using a clear block and taking some black ink and stamping that right onto my banner. Just giving that a little bit of a push. And then I'm going to start putting my card together. So what I'm doing here is just taking some foam tape, lining the back of the butterfly with that foam tape to give it a little bit of dimension on the card. And I'll center that right on the front of my card panel. And I'm also going to take some foam tape and add that to the back of my wavy banner. Now what I like to do is trim up my foam tape and then take the adhesive off, and that'll allow me to maneuver my foam tape in that wavy form, and that curves really well when it doesn't have the backing on it. And then I can just add that right under my butterfly. So we have this beautiful sparkly background that we customized, so you can make those colors anything that you want. Okay, now so for card number 2, we're going to be working with the rainbow that we created on the pixie dust cardstock. And I'm actually going to start by creating some windows for a front panel. I learned my lesson. I actually had filmed a card previously that just completely did not work out. So I kind of learned my lesson that this ink is still wet and I didn't want it to get on everything else. So I'm creating something to go on top of it. So I took some of the simple Puffy cloud frames. This is just happened to be the cloud die that I have. And I'm randomly putting them on the front of this white card panel. This is measuring 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I do end up trimming it down, but I like to start with a little bit bigger of a piece of cardstock because it gives me some room to work with. So once I run those through my die cut machine and remove the frames from them, I'll attach them some more into those open spaces. And then I'll run it through one more time to do it on some of the edges to give it more of a sporadic look. And then once I have that done, and I do save those clouds and the frames so I can have those for a future project because those are great to have off on the side. Then I'm going to take the large stitched 4-bar rectangle and I'm going to line that up on my base so I can have a nice stitched edge around this. Now, I had used this previously in a video that I deleted. I'm not using that portion. And I had die cut a piece of the cardstock when the ink was still wet. And what happened was that ink got on my die. So of course it transferred onto my background here. So I'm just taking a sand eraser to kind of buff off those edges. It didn't come perfectly clean, but I put way too much work into that background to completely start over. So I got off what I could with that sand eraser, and the rest is just going to have to be part of the character of the card. So next, to attach the panel, I am taking foam tape and I'm going to line up the entire back of this panel with foam tape. I'm going to get in between the clouds, and at this point I was pretty confident that my foam tape would stick to this textured background because I've done it before. And this is where I'm going to start sharing some do's and don'ts. I don't know if it was because of the texture or if the ink was still a little wet, but I went ahead and attached that and I trimmed around the edges because I do have a lot of excess there. So I was giving that a really good push down, trimmed off the edges, which I do save also because they're too beautiful to throw away. And when I was doing this, all of a sudden I noticed that the foam tape was popping right off. It was not holding whatsoever when I went to go and attach this to another panel of cardstock. It just popped right off. So I'm going to go with a backup plan, which is taking some of the lawnfawn liquid glue. And I'm going to add this liquid glue all over to that foam tape because, again, a lot of work has gone into this. I am determined to make this work. So once I have that liquid glue on there, I'm attaching that to the background, just lining up my corners. And I do go and I place this under something heavy. I have a binder that I keep my swatches in, so I'm placing that under the binder. And I'm going to let that sit there for a little bit to really adhere. While that's going on, I'm going to go ahead and take another banner and die cut that from some mermaid cardstock. I'm also going to make a butterfly for the front of my card. So I'm taking the bottom layer and also one of the little bodies and die cutting that from white cardstock. And I just hold that in place with Post-it tape and run through my die cut machine. And I take the layered portion and I die cut that from some fog cardstock. I'll go ahead and use my tweezers and the lawnfawn liquid glue to attach my layered butterfly together, and also the little body. And I did die cut that, like I said, out of white. That just kind of helped make it stand out just a little bit from the fog cardstock. And then once I have my butterfly done, I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I'm also using the Wavy Sayings stamp set in a clear block and the black ink and just stamping that right on top of that mermaid cardstock. You don't want to squish too hard or you'll make your letters kind of squished on that banner. So you want to be careful how much pressure you're putting down. And then I did trim off one side of that banner because I'm going to have that flush at the side, one side of my card. So I'm still waiting for everything to kind of adhere with my background. While I'm waiting, I'm attaching a piece of white cardstock to a base that I created with fog cardstock. So my base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. My second layer is 4 by 5 1/4. So here we go. Another tip for you. You're learning right along with me since I had never done this before. The liquid glue didn't work, which honestly baffled me because I just used it on the first card that we did. So I'm going for reinforcements, and that is using the lawnfawn double-sided adhesive. So I'm taking that and I'm lining again over that foam tape. And then once I remove the backing on all of that double-sided tape, I'll attach that to my card, pushing that down, and I'm kind of checking here and there what it's doing. And I was feeling pretty confident about this, so I did go ahead, add adhesive to the back, and attach that to my card panel. Just lining that up, that just kind of gives it a nice white border. I really like the fog cardstock from Lawnfawn. That's one of my favorites. It just adds a little bit of something to the card. If I am not sure of a color to add. Fog is just going to definitely be a go-to. So now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and attach the butterfly and the sentiment. I'm feeling pretty confident about everything that I can finish this off and that my background's going to stick. And I'm just using the liquid glue to attach this. So I have the butterfly kind of tucked a little bit behind the sentiment. And then I'm adding the liquid glue to just certain parts that are going to touch my white panel with the Windows die cut out of it. I'll just hold that down for a couple seconds, make sure that's adhered really well to the card front, and then you can see I'm kind of pulling that up. Now, if I really were to pull, it would come off, but it is pretty stuck on there. I was pretty happy that my reinforcements worked, and this is just another lesson of, keep going with it. Don't give up if something is just not working right. Now, what I do want to show you is this card here that's off on the side. This is one that I actually had filmed footage for and deleted the footage because that's when I discovered that the ink on the background is not dry. I have a ton of inky spots all over the place of when I pushed my finger on it and it transferred to my white areas. But I love this card design, so I wanted to show this to you. And I'm just grabbing one of those clouds and kind of rubbing on it. You can see a little bit of the ink is coming off. But at this point, this is probably about 5 hours later when I finally finished the videos throughout the day. But I really loved this card design. So this is also something you could create too. It's just that the ink was not dry when I was doing this. And so there were so many inky spots. I just needed to start over. But I hope that you learned something with me. Definitely give this technique a try, adding the ink to the pixie dust cardstock because it is gorgeous. You just want to be mindful of the ink being wet. So thank you so much for joining me today and have an amazing day.